Now, debate is raging over proposed changes to the Fair Work Act. The so-called family-friendly arrangements could see workers entitled to much more flexible working hours, as employers are less able to say no, rather. To explain further, we're joined in Sydney by workplace law expert Joydeep Hor. Good morning to you. Just how much more flexible are the working arrangements set out in the new stage of the Fair Work Act?
Well, good morning. I think it's important to understand that the whole notion of a right to request flexible working arrangements was introduced by the Fair Work Act in 2009, so has been in place for a number of years now. What's significant, though, about these changes is that whereas the current right, which is confined to an employee being able to make the request for flexibility, only in very limited circumstances, namely that they have carers' responsibilities for children who are under school age, or if the child has a disability under the age of 18. Other than those circumstances, as the law currently sits, an employee is not able to make a request for flexible work. What the government has proposed with the Fair Work Bill is that those grounds on which an employee could make such a request are going to be expanded quite considerably. Indeed, an employee who has carers' responsibilities for example, an elderly relative, an employee who is subject to violence at home, an employee who is over the age of 55, and a number of other categories will now be one of the grounds, or some of the grounds, on which an employee might be able to make such a request.
OK, what issues do employers have with this?
Well, I think the challenge for employers is going to be that if you look at the last 3 years, a lot of employers have really struggled with coping with this right to request, because the employer has to, as a matter of presumption, agree to the request unless it has reasonable business grounds for doing so. And one of the other changes that's proposed by these reforms are that there'll be greater clarity provided as to what those reasonable business grounds are. Having said that, most employers are going to, I think, face into a considerably larger number of requests and are probably going to find it hard to pry as to the legitimacy of a number of those requests from their employees.
Isn't this, though, Joydeep, in the long run a good thing? Because there are numerous examples, as you well know, of companies implementing family-friendly policies and doing rather well out of them.
Absolutely. I think there's a number of sociological imperatives. As with all of these things, the reconciliation of the sociological imperatives with the commercial imperatives is always a difficult one in an employment context. I think there are a lot of employers, particularly the larger ones, who will be able to accommodate these changes and respond to them very proactively and very positively for their business. It's the smaller and medium-sized businesses and employers that are going to struggle a lot more, because if you employ 20, 25 people, having 2 or 3 people change their working arrangements from full-time to part-time is a very significant percentage of your workforce and is likely to have a far greater impact in terms of your capacity to manage that. Whereas if you're employing 3,000 or 4,000 people, it's a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So how far away are these changes? I suppose they're always, as with any bits of legislation, hostage to the Parliament at the moment.
Indeed, and important also to note that these particular reforms have been bundled in with a wide range of other reforms, including to penalty rates, the introduction of a new remedy for workplace bullying, some changes around parental leave. So there's a lot in that, and the timing, given the election in the middle of September, is particularly interesting. My understanding is that there's some desire to get this pushed through in the next 2 months.
We will wait and see. Joydeep Hor, thanks so much for your insights this morning.
Thanks very much.